Hello everyone, my name is Josh, and today we are working on my 2000 BMW 740iL. To you, this car probably looks perfect, but to me, it's a long ways from perfect. Now, any car can look good on YouTube, but if I just change the angle of how I'm taking a few of these shots, unfortunately, this paint is far, far from perfect. I don't know what the backstory of this paint is on the car, but none of it is original. The whole car was resprayed, and it is a very hit and miss job all throughout. Some panels you can tell someone really took their time, did the body work correctly, and all in all, for out of the gun, pretty good results. And some areas were wet sanded, some areas were spot sanded, some areas were denibbed and then never polished. It is just a mess of clear coat, texture, orange peel, everything under the sun. But thankfully for me, my day job is fixing paint, so I'm gonna do what I do best. Wet sanding paint can be very, very tricky. In its foundation, it's a very simple principle. You're just simply leveling clear coat, but that's only possible if you have enough material to work with. So before I even touched the car, I went through and measured it. Most factory cars that come off a showroom floor nowadays, they have probably 4 to 5 mil of paint, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more. This car has anywhere from 12 mil to 19 mil of paint, which is a ton. Now, it is impossible to tell how much of that is clear coat, how much of it is base, how much is Bondo. Those are all kind of up in the air. So we do have to be very, very careful to read the paint as we go, do only what we need to remove the texture and nothing more. See, especially in these next shots, how the lowers of the car, particularly from the door handles down, are exceptionally bad. There's so many variables that go into painting a car, but from what this looks like, it looks like a pretty inexperienced painter did this. Largely because, one, the contamination of the paint, there's dust, there's solvent pop, there's fish eyes, but particularly in just the strokes of how the clear was actually laid down on the panels, you can tell in the lower half of the doors, it is so bad. So whoever was doing this was either really, really rushing or was a little bit new to this, but thankfully they gave me a lot of clear coat to work with. If you want to see how this car actually came to be, head over to my channel because there's about a 45-minute long video about the backstory of this car and all the mechanical work to actually get it to the point of needing a little bit of paint restoration rather than everything else that goes with an E38 like this. I bought this almost 2 years ago and it was pretty much mechanically totaled. So if you're more interested in the mechanical side of this stuff, go check that out. Now you're going to notice throughout this video, I'm wearing a lot of different clothes and there's a lot of different angles because I spent so much time sanding this car. I got so carried away. I originally just kind of wanted to get this better and smoothed, and then it's my day job. I own a shop called Amaris Auto Care, and we get to do a lot of cool stuff, and I knew that people would be looking at this car and I couldn't just, so to speak, half-ass the work. So this took a long time. I had to kind of feel out how this clear was going to respond because every car sands so differently. You can see in this shot right here how you can read the paint. There's areas that are very, very smooth, and there's other areas that have a lot of texture to them and some that just have some shine. Now the marks that you see are from the machine that I'm using, and it's a DA 15mm orbital that I'm using, sometimes a 21, and it's got a 1500 grit disc on it, and it allows me to water sand the paint down to a very, very level finish. And then obviously with the edges, I have to do a lot of hand sanding to get it perfect. If you watch the long strip lights shift from the left side to the right side, do you see that clarity difference? That's because of the 1500 grit sandpaper that has eliminated a whole layer, not a whole layer, but a lot of clear coat and restored it back down to a perfectly smooth finish. Now this can be very tricky, particularly on a car like this, because there's so much contamination in the paint in the form of dust or specks or who knows what was in it, that oftentimes when you're machine sanding, those little specks get caught in your sandpaper and can create pigtails. And it's basically a very, very deep scratch. And if you're wet sanding on thinner clear coat, sometimes you don't have enough paint to recover from it. Now this is a very good example of reading clear after sanding. This is the first time that I've sanded this little strip, and this is still in the first stage of 1500. As I dry it off, we should see completely matte, completely smooth clear coat. But do you see how it has a lot of texture and peel to it? This is completely normal for clear coat that was in this bad a state. There's a lot of areas that are completely matte, and there's even more areas that are shiny, kind of shiny, and it's a very, very clear tell that we're still shaving off the peaks of the clear coat and the peaks of any of the dust and contamination in the paint. So this is a good tell that we need to do another pass. In the case of this particular panel, I actually need to do 3 more passes. Now look at that clear coat. I haven't polished this or compounded it yet, but look how clear and smooth and uniform all the clear coat is. That is now ready for this next step, which is rotary compounding. Now, there is a debate as old as time of whether you should DA or whether you should rotary. I have been doing this for, 12 years or so. Once you become proficient and skilled with the rotary, it is a very, very powerful and efficient tool to get really good results. You can do the same with DA. It's much, much better to start if you're brand new to this with just DAs because of how difficult it is to damage clear coat. But as you gain some more experience, the power that you have in a rotary with a good wool pad and some proper compound makes the job go a lot faster and oftentimes with better results. I wet sanded the roof on this car so much that it took several passes, sometimes even up to 4 or 5, to get all the marks out from wet sanding. Do you see in the light how I focus and zoom in on it, how there's still a lot of little things dancing around? Some of those are pigtails because of how bad the contamination was, and some of it is just very deep wet sanding marks. After the 1500, I do 3000 and then 5000, and then I compound, but still it needed a lot of compounding. If you've never done any kind of paint polishing to this extent, it's very, very, very tedious. But if you're willing to not rush to try to get that final result, you just kind of put in some of your favorite music. It's such a great form of therapy, and it's a good thing because it takes so long to do this properly. But I've been doing this for a long time, and I still really enjoy it, especially if it's something that, well, 1 is my own, or 2, we get some really cool customer cars through the shop. And it's so refreshing being able to take something that someone's not very happy with and deliver them something that is so close to perfect, or at least in their eyes. That just never really gets old. Which is partially why it's so embarrassing for me to own the car in the state that it is right now, because it's kind of that tale as old as time, as the bread maker never has time to make his own bread. Same kind of thing. All my cars are dirty and scratched, so I'm trying to change that. Switching over to the other side of the roof, this is a very important step, and that's block sanding, because I can only get so close to the edges with the machine, and I want to make sure that once this car is finished, that transition from the flat part of the panel to the edge is just as smooth and impossible to tell that I was ever there. This is just pure manual labor. It's be calm, take your time, don't rush it. And particularly with the edges like this, you can see on that edge from the rear window up to the roof how there's that shiny spot, and that's what we need to knock down and get completely matched to the center of the roof. If this isn't done properly when the car is outside, especially if there's any vertical or straight lines that are shadowing onto the clear coat when it's finished, you're going to see a smooth panel step to a ripple, and it becomes very obvious that someone was working on the paint, and that's what I'm trying to eliminate here. This process is repeated over and over and over again for every single step. So 1500 until I have perfectly smooth clear coat, re-wet the panel, wipe it clean, followed up with 3000, repeat that until I get good clarity in the clear coat, clean the whole panel again for any dust that might have come up, move over to 5000, DA it all out, and then after that we can move to rotary compounding. I think you're probably getting the picture now as to why the title of this video is truly accurate. I really conservatively sank 80 hours into doing the clear coat on this car, which is just kind of dumb, but just wait to the end. It looks so good. This is a prime example of when you're ready to move on to compounding. Do you see how the whole panel's uniform now? You can see very faint machine lines, but look at the lights. Do you see how they're not dancing anymore? There's just a tiny bit of variation, but everything's completely smooth. This is what the whole car needs to be like before it can be compounded, polished, jeweled, coated, and PPF'd. Now there's areas on this car where I personally like to block sand only. I don't get a machine, and that was the C-pillar because it's very round, it's very narrow. it's a personal preference thing. You can use a 3-inch machine if you'd like, but I just like the control and how uniform I can get a panel, particularly by hand. But it's that never-ending debate of trying to be efficient with your time, but also get good results. Now, in this particular clip, we were in April of 2024, and we're getting so close to spring that I called Gwen, who works with me, and I was like, I need help. This is taking so long. I put hours into the car every single night, but if you do the math, and I get 2 to 3 hours a night after my regular work, and I have 80 hours into wet sanding this was taking a long, long time, and I really wanted to get the car done before our busy season kicked in, which is pretty much around April. After 2 passes of 1500, look how bad the hood was. There's contamination and dust everywhere, and there's still so much peel. The hood was easily one of the most important parts in the car because it's such a big part of the car. And once it was all finished, it was well worth the labor. But we had to turn our attention to the lowers now because thanks to Quinn, we got a lot done in a few days on the car. So I got the car up on the hoist and got working on the lowers, which were easily probably the worst areas of this car. This clip in particular is a very good example of wet sanded versus not wet sanded. Look at the bottle. You can't even hardly see the lid. It's so blurry. But when I move it over to the panel that has been wet sanded, wait for it. Oh, totally clear. All right, it's been 10 or 11 minutes. I think you're getting the idea. Wet sanding takes a long time and gets a lot of clarity. So here we are. The car is fully wet sanded. It's compounded up to the rotary stage. And now we get to refine all the work that we've done to this point. I'm moving on to DA compounding. So I'm re-compounding the paint again to further smooth the clear coat. So this is a very, very strong, effective compound that I'm using with a dual action 21mm throw Roops machine that is going to get every last bit of sanding marks I could have possibly missed. Even though I don't think I missed any, it's an insurance stage, and it's going to make sure this clear coat is as smooth as it can be. Starting to look a little different, huh? This is the really satisfying part of this job because the car is no longer looking like a complete wreck and is really starting to look like something. And you need to remember, I recorded this over months and months and months in between work. So we are probably almost 4 months ahead from the first clip that you saw to here. So I am desperately eager to see this thing get finished. When you look down the side of the car now, you can see there's a really deep wet shine. And remember, this is still only compounding. So fast forward a little bit, all the compounding is done on the car, and now I get to move on to polishing and jeweling, which is just pure refinement. We're not removing any more clear coat now. We're basically just enhancing it and making sure that any of our marks from compounding are gone completely. On the right-hand side is where we rotaried after wet sanding, and on the left is where I've DA compounded. See the clarity difference? The metallic really starts to pop and the panel starts to look really uniform. This is a really satisfying part of this job. Now we're really getting some results. This is now DA polished and jeweled. Look at the shine. Tell me this wasn't worth the work. This isn't even coated yet. And you can barely even tell the difference between the paint and my floor. It is just beaming in the shop. Ah, so worth it. Now that all of the wet sanding, compounding, and polishing is behind us, I pulled the car into the other side of the shop to prepare it for ceramic coating. Now, normally I don't need to wash cars after doing this. We can keep a project fairly clean, but this car had so much wet sanding runs from the water carrying through door seams and seals and engine bay that I wanted to give this a nice clean before I got into ceramic coating. As I was hunting for the best results possible, I decided just as an insurance to do one more stage of jeweling to enhance the clear coat as much as possible, remove any kind of wash residue or any light swirling I could have possibly inflicted during that wash. And call me crazy, but I think it made it just a little bit shinier. Look at the left side compared to the right side. I mean, it's shinier for sure. Is it worth the time? I don't know, but it is shiny. Anyways, you guys must be getting sick of watching me polish this car. So let's move on to ceramic coating. Now we could do an entire video about ceramic coating, what it does, how it works, etc., etc. But what you need to know is that it's a chemical glass coating. When it comes in contact with the clear coat, it starts to develop a very, very thick bond to the clear coat, and we level it. And it actually can physically increase the thickness of how much total paint thickness there is. Now there is so many ceramic coatings out there, and it is an endless discussion of what does what. What I'm using here is proprietary to my company because we actually develop all of our ceramic coatings in-house for our aviation division. And this stuff is stout, and it is very, very, very shiny. The only thing that sucks about it is that the stuff is very, very difficult to install because when it's all said and done, we're actually able to replicate almost the thickness of a layer of clear coat with ceramic coating, which is pretty well unheard of in the whole industry. So unfortunately for the installer, it's a lot of work. It takes me almost a day to do a ceramic coating on a car like this, especially because of how thick it is. But man, it looks so good. The ceramic coating isn't just for the paint either. We've got ceramic coating specific for wheels, for glass, for textiles, for plastics, for headlights, taillights, trim, etc., etc., etc. So that way this whole car washes the same way. The reason why I'm ceramic coating this car is that it's going to be a significantly more durable surface after all of this paintwork has been done. Clear coat, especially the clear coat on this car, is fairly soft, so even a microfiber not used properly is going to put some very, very light surface scratches. So you add up 100 car washes and you're going to start seeing all the paints getting all weird and scratched, and all this work is almost for not almost for nothing, but it's going to be really frustrating. So the ceramic coating, once it's on there, aside from just appearance, is going to be about 2-3 times harder to scratch. So if you take a key to it, yes, you're still going to scratch it, but that fine wash marks from normal cleanup and so on make it significantly easier to keep a black car clean and a lot more difficult to scratch.
So I got these really cool powder-coated valve covers. Pulled them off the car because they looked awful, and I desperately needed to do a valve cover gasket job. Do you know what these are? If you're a BMW guy, you know what these are. Does that look familiar at all? I found these in my valve cover, or in my head, It was just kind of hanging out there. And very conveniently, one of these has a part number on them that starts with BMW 11.311. So I searched that up because I'm like, wow, this looks like a timing guide. It's a timing guide. So I can't show you the afters of the car because it's currently fully disassembled. And now we have to dive into the job that I really, really, really did not want to do. So stay tuned until the next video where I question why I keep buying these cars.
You know, the thing to remember with project cars is that they're projects, and sometimes there's a lot of unexpected surprises. But it's a good test of skill because this was a little out of my league and I'd never really done anything like this before. So please stay tuned because the timing guides get done in the next video and a lot more. In this car, it was all worth it. Thank you for watching. If you watched this far, have a great day, guys.